June 1941. Somewhere along the Eastern Front, an S-65 tractor churns through knee-deep mud, effortlessly pulling a massive 203mm howitzer behind it. The diesel engine hums steadily, tracks gripping the earth with mechanical precision. For the Red Army gunners, this machine represents reliability itself. But there's a contradiction. This same tractor had a reputation on Soviet farms for constantly breaking down, what officials called alarming breakdown rates. Yet in wartime, artillery crews relied on it completely. So what changed? The machine or how it was used? Today we're uncovering the real story of the Stalinets S-65, a tractor blamed for failing on the farm, but trusted as the Red Army's workhorse. To understand the S-65, we have to start with the disaster it was engineered to cover up, the total collapse of Soviet agriculture. The government claimed the solution was more machines, but the truth was, the machines were never the problem. We need to go back to 1928. Ukraine was called the granary of Europe for good reason. This single region produced between 25 and 27% of the entire Soviet Union's grain. Fertile black soil stretched for hundreds of miles. Experienced farmers had worked this land for generations. Then Stalin decided to remake agriculture overnight. Forced collectivization wasn't just a change in policy, it was a direct attack on the peasants. Private farms that had fed the nation for generations became illegal overnight. Farmers were ordered to turn over their land, animals, and equipment to state-run collectives. The result was immediate and devastating. Peasants faced a grim choice: surrender their livestock to the collectives for nothing, or slaughter the animals and feed their families one last time. Within the first years of collectivization, 40% of cattle and 60% of sheep were gone, not from disease but from farmers who refused to submit to state theft. What followed was the Ukrainian famine, one of history's most brutal. Between 1929 and 1933, an estimated 4.5 to 7.5 million people died of starvation. Many were the same Ukrainian farmers who had once supplied food to the entire Soviet Union. By the early 1930s, grain production had fallen significantly below 1928 levels. Regions that used to export food were now starving. Collective farms didn't simply fail to match private farm output, they were much, much worse. Stalin faced a choice: admit collectivization was a disaster or find a scapegoat. He chose mechanization as that scapegoat. The official line became that Soviet agriculture was struggling not because of failed policies, but because it wasn't mechanized enough. The state claimed that what the collectives needed wasn't experience or incentive, it was more tractors. So the S-65 was born, not as a sign of progress, but as a mechanical bandage for the wounds of ideology. Propaganda promised that tractors would redeem collectivization, transforming Soviet farming and proving the superiority of socialism. But the S-65's capable engineering created an unexpected problem. The better it performed, the more obvious the system's failures became. Soviet planners, inspired by successful American tractors, set out to build something even tougher, a machine capable of hauling heavy loads through the worst mud and conditions imaginable. They succeeded. The S-65 was a technical achievement, but it entered an agricultural system already gutted by the loss of skilled farmers. Just as Soviet agriculture needed experience and know-how more than ever, the state bet everything on machines operated by people who'd never used them before. The result? A costly mechanical failure, not because the tractor was poorly built, but because the system itself was never designed to produce food. For nearly a decade, the S-65 would be blamed for failures rooted in politics, not engineering. But the story of the S-65 was far from over. This machine was about to face its ultimate test. But if you want to see more stories like how this failed farm tractor became the backbone of the Red Army's artillery, make sure you're subscribed, because the S-65 is about to prove that its failure was just a disguise. The Chelyabinsk tractor plant received its orders in 1937, build the Soviet Union's most powerful agricultural tractor. What emerged from those factory floors was genuinely impressive engineering. The Stalinets S-65 wasn't just another farm machine. This was an 11-ton prime mover built like a tank. At its heart sat a water-cooled, 4-stroke diesel engine designated the M17. This power plant delivered a constant 65 horsepower with peaks up to 75 horsepower when needed. Before this diesel workhorse, there was the S-60, a Soviet-built copy of the American Caterpillar 60, running a 4-cylinder gasoline engine at about 60 horsepower. It weighed roughly 9,500 kilograms and could pull more than 4,000 kilograms in low gear. It proved the concept in mud and heavy going, but its reliance on precious refined fuels that were better prioritized for aircraft pushed engineers toward a more efficient answer: diesel. Quick specs that mattered in the field. Approximately 11,200 kilograms curb weight, 500 millimeter wide tracks with 34 links per side, 5 road wheels and 2 support rollers per side, and a 6-volt electrical system supporting front headlights and rear driving lights. But power meant nothing without reliability. The M17 was a low RPM design that could deliver peak torque indefinitely. While other tractors strained and overheated under heavy loads, the S-65 just kept pulling. The engine alone, without its cooling system, weighed 2 tons. This wasn't built for speed, it was built to work. The drivetrain reflected this philosophy. 3 forward gears and 1 reverse gave operators precise control over pulling power. For cold starts in harsh weather, a separate 20-horsepower gasoline pony engine spun the diesel to life. Think about that. It took a whole second engine just to wake the main diesel. Overbuilt for speed? No. Built for relentless pull. The tracks themselves told the story of serious engineering. Each side mounted 5 road wheels and 2 support rollers, spreading the tractor's massive weight across 34 track links that were 500 millimeters wide. This track system was crucial. The S-65 could maintain traction in mud that would stop wheeled tractors completely. Ground pressure remained manageable even when pulling maximum loads through the worst conditions. And those loads were substantial. The S-65 could sustain pulls of 4.1 tons continuously. For comparison, that's enough force to drag a fully loaded freight car up a moderate grade. American tractors of similar power often couldn't match this pulling capacity, especially in sustained operations. The production numbers revealed Soviet industrial ambition. Between 1937 and 1941, Chelyabinsk manufactured 37,626 S-65 tractors. To put this in perspective, Caterpillar's famous 60 tractor, which the S-65 was designed to match, had a total production run of roughly 18,948 units over its entire lifespan. The Soviets were mass-producing at roughly double Caterpillar's rate while matching their ground pressure and exceeding their pulling power. This represented genuine industrial achievement. For military applications, which would come later, engineers had included a 5-plane adjustable towing system at the rear. This wasn't an afterthought. The S-65 was designed from the beginning to handle the heaviest pulling jobs imaginable. Soviet engineers had studied American designs carefully, then improved on them. Where Caterpillar tractors used complex transmissions, the S-65 kept things simple and robust. Where American machines prioritized speed, the Soviet design prioritized sustained power delivery. The promise seemed clear. This machine would mechanize Soviet agriculture and vindicate collectivization once and for all. Propaganda posters showed S-65s transforming vast collective farms, their diesel engines humming as they pulled multiple implements across endless fields. The technical specifications supported this optimism. Here was a tractor that could work continuously in conditions that would defeat other machines. It could pull heavier loads farther and more reliably than anything else in its class. Soviet industrial planners had reason for confidence. They'd created a machine that matched the best American engineering while adding improvements for their specific conditions. The S-65 represented everything the Soviet system claimed to do better than capitalism: rational planning, superior engineering, and mass production efficiency. But the S-65 faced a basic problem. It was engineered for productivity, but it was introduced into a system that prioritized political control over actual results. Every part of the tractor was built for reliable, continuous work. Yet collective farms operated according to orders, not outcomes. This clash between machine and system made trouble inevitable. The system that would doom the S-65 had a deceptively simple name: Machine Tractor Stations, or MTS. By 1940, approximately 7,000 of these stations controlled the Soviet Union's tractors. But this wasn't a system for efficiency, it was a trap. Imagine you're a peasant operator. This powerful S-65 is your lifeline, but the system is designed to make you fail. It had 3 fatal flaws. First, you don't own the tractor. It belongs to a distant MTS station, so you have no real stake in its long-term care. Second, you can't fix it. Even if you know exactly what's wrong, a broken fuel line, a loose track, you are forbidden from touching it. You must report the breakdown and wait, sometimes for weeks, for an MTS mechanic to arrive. Meanwhile, critical planting or harvesting windows close and crops rot in the fields. And third, the MTS wasn't a service center, it was a collection agency. The stations were run by party loyalists whose job was to enforce grain quotas. This revealed the system's true purpose. During planting, tractors could sit broken for weeks, but when it was time to collect the state's grain, every machine was suddenly repaired and running. Once the grain was extracted, the tractors were simply parked until the state needed them again. This wasn't agricultural policy. It was organized extraction, dressed up as progress. The result wasn't just inefficiency, it was famine. As grain moved out under quota, villages across Ukraine and the southern breadbasket were left with empty granaries and silent fields. But all that changed in 1941, when the German invasion gave the S-65 a new set of operators, and finally, a chance to prove its true worth. June 22, 1941. Operation Barbarossa shattered the morning quiet along the Soviet border. Within hours, German forces were advancing on multiple fronts, and the Red Army found itself in desperate need of equipment it didn't have. The Soviet military had prepared for war, but not this kind of war. They'd expected battles fought from prepared positions with adequate supply lines. Instead, they faced a mobile enemy advancing faster than anyone thought possible, leaving Soviet forces scrambling to move heavy equipment across impossible terrain. Artillery units faced the worst crisis. The Red Army possessed some of the world's most powerful guns, including massive 203mm howitzers and 280mm mortars that could devastate enemy positions. But these weapons were useless without something to move them. Soviet military planners had assumed they'd have time to position heavy artillery before major engagements. The German blitzkrieg made that assumption obsolete overnight. Artillery pieces that weighed dozens of tons needed to be repositioned constantly, often across muddy fields and through forests where roads didn't exist. Standard military tractors couldn't handle the job. Most were too light for the heaviest guns, and those powerful enough lacked the reliability for sustained operations under combat conditions. The Red Army needed something built for continuous heavy work in the worst possible conditions. They found it in an unexpected place: the collective farms. Military requisition orders went out across the Soviet Union. S-65 tractors were pulled from MTS stations and collective farms, painted in military colors, and rushed to artillery units. The same machines that had been failing Soviet agriculture were suddenly critical to the war effort. The transformation was immediate and remarkable. Removed from the MTS system, operated by military personnel who understood machinery and maintained by Army mechanics focused on performance rather than politics, the S-65 revealed its true capabilities. Artillery crews discovered they could count on these tractors. The S-65 could pull a fully loaded 203mm howitzer through mud that would stop trucks completely. The low RPM diesel engine delivered steady power for hours without overheating. The wide tracks distributed weight effectively, preventing the tractor from getting bogged down even when towing massive loads. More importantly, the S-65 was reliable. Military mechanics maintained the tractors properly, performed regular service, and made repairs immediately when problems arose. Operators received actual training instead of being thrown onto machines they'd never seen before. The contrast with collective farm performance was stunning. These were the same tractors that had suffered alarming breakdown rates in agricultural service. But under military operation, they worked exactly as their engineers had intended. German forces noticed this reliability too, but from a different perspective. As Wehrmacht units advanced across Soviet territory, they captured hundreds of abandoned S-65 tractors along with the artillery pieces they'd been towing. German logistics officers were initially skeptical. Soviet equipment had a reputation for crude construction and poor reliability. But field tests revealed something different. The captured S-65s were robust, well-engineered machines that could handle heavy work in difficult conditions. The Wehrmacht began using captured S-65s for their own artillery operations. German gun crews found the Soviet tractors could tow their heaviest pieces through terrain that challenged their own prime movers. The same failed farm tractors were now serving both sides in the conflict, proving their worth under the most demanding conditions imaginable. This created a bizarre situation. S-65 tractors that had been declared mechanical failures on Soviet collective farms were now successfully towing German artillery across the Eastern Front. The machines hadn't changed. The systems operating them had. Soviet artillery units, meanwhile, were discovering what their tractors could really do. Crews learned to trust the S-65's pulling power completely. They could position heavy guns in locations that would have been impossible with other prime movers, giving Soviet artillery tactical advantages that helped offset German mobility. The tractor's features, first meant for farming, turned out to be perfect for war. Its adjustable towing system let crews hook up artillery quickly. The wide tracks gave it grip where wheels would get stuck. Most importantly, the S-65 could run for hours without a break, crucial for moving guns during retreats or rapid advances, something lighter vehicles just couldn't do. Red Army logistics also used S-65s to recover stuck tanks. And heavy gear, especially early in the war, before purpose-built recovery vehicles were common. It was hard to miss the irony. A tractor blamed for failing on farms was now moving heavy weapons in Europe's toughest terrain. Soviet tank divisions also relied on tractors like the S-65 for support, helping transport equipment, tow vehicles, and more. Crews found them indispensable for many jobs beyond their official assignments. Every battlefield success was an indictment of the system that had wasted so much talent, time, and life. The S-65 was never the problem. How it was used and why makes all the difference. It is a powerful reminder that the greatest failures in history are often not technical, but human. The S-65's military service made one thing clear. The tractor was never flawed. It was the system that failed it. What changed? Not the tractor, but the way it was used. In the military, S-65s were maintained, repaired, and operated by trained crews with clear priorities. The tragedy wasn't in Soviet machinery, but in Soviet policy. Given the right conditions, the S-65 could have transformed agriculture the way its engineers intended. Instead, it became a tool of extraction and, later, a hero of war. Its true potential only seen when politics got out of the way. The Stalinets S-65 wasn't a failed tractor. It was the perfect tool trapped in a failed system. When ideology conflicts with engineering reality, the machine becomes the victim. But history remembers the truth. So subscribe for more untold stories of machines caught between politics and performance.